Doors. Let's build some doors. Welcome back to the shop and the channel, and back to this, the wall cabinet for the kitchen made of cherry. We're going to build doors now, and I've got a little change up from what I described in earlier videos about how I'm going to build these doors. When you're doing a small box like this with face frame, one of the things that aids in building doors for it that fit correctly is I hot glued some battens behind the face frames across the opening of the cabinet. That way I can take my stiles and put them in here and get the measurements absolutely correct and trim them off, and I can cut all four of the stiles to the same length, to the length that fits in here perfectly, or as perfect as you can with wood, of course. And then we're going to do the rails. The rails are the tricky part because that determines the absolute width of your door, and you get it as you. You can sneak up on it. We're using the bits that I'm going to use. We'll go into more detail on the bits, the rail style bits, and the raised panel bit for the fancy wood. For hinges, we have a couple other projects in the house where we've used these finialed Parliament hinges. Come on, get on camera. There we go. Finialed Parliament hinges. And they're going to, these, I know. Let the screams fly. These are the no mortise hinges. And the reason I'm using no mortise hinges is, yeah, they're easier to install overall. I mean, cutting mortises is not a big deal, but this is just quicker. And they work fine for small projects like this. I've got a large project out there in the kitchen that has no mortise, these hinges, and they're longer, but there's 3 on each door. So it holds the weight very well. So the first step is I'm going to cut the stiles off camera, get them all the right size, and then work out the length that I need for the. I'm pointing here because all the wood's over here. The length for the rails, and then we'll start cutting this stuff on the router table. This shall be interesting. I've never done raised panels on the router table. I've always done table saw raised panels. Oh well, first time for everything. So let's move on and cut some wood. The stiles are cut to length and placed in the box on the battens. I've gapped them all the way around for the gaps I'm looking for. There's the center line, and there's a gap here for the hinges on either side. And the measurement that's really important is this measurement plus 3/4 of an inch, because I'll show you an example here. This is a rail that's cut on the router table with the bits. You'll see them in a bit, and the rail will sit here. Now this length here is 3/8 of an inch here. So the tongue and the groove are 3/8 of an inch. So I got to get that measurement correct, so that I cut the rail portion the right length before I run it through the router table. So what we're going for, here's a sample of the raised panel that I did. These are my dummies for testing the bits, like so. And then the raised panel itself, and it's going to sit like that. You've probably all figured this out already. So style, actually it goes this way, but let's pretend. Like that. But so it's basically rail, stile, and raised panel. And so my next step now is to get that measurement and then cut the blanks for the rails the right length. I can actually cut them a little over to make sure they're going to fit. And if they don't fit, I can actually trim up a little bit, run them through the router again, and it'll cut it down to the next, to that next depth that I need. But this right here, the rail really the important part. That's gonna set the total width of the doors. So now that I've got this set up, it's time to go over to the router table and do some routering, as it were. A wee bit of an interlude for a quick story about your eyes and your customer's eyes and whatever. When I get these doors in place and I have to shave a little wood off here and there to get a perfect fit, and I say no one's gonna be able to tell the difference, this is what I mean. I was at a demonstration years ago, years and years, and many years, probably 30 years ago, shopsmith demonstration, and the guy was turning some small legs for a table, small low table, and he told us this anecdote about someone asking him once, well, how do you make them exactly the same? Because you're doing it by hand. And he grabbed one of them, and one in each hand, and held them out like this. Show me the difference. You see what's going on there? I tell that story all the time. Show me the difference. And you can't. So if it's just slight variations from part to part to part, no one's going to notice. If you want those parts to be absolutely perfect, commission to a company that can cut knives and cut them in a lathe and mass produce them. But just turn them on your lathe or do doors like this. No one's going to be able to tell the difference. Let's start with the rail and stile bits. This is from Rockler. This is a match set. There's no adjustment to the bit itself. The only adjustment is to the up and down in the router table to get them where you want the cut to be correctly. More on that in a minute. Let's start with the stile. Take the stile bit. Notice the profile. Now the stile bit is cut with the workpiece. The front of the workpiece, the front of the door is riding on the router table, and you adjust it to get the right depth and everything of cut in here, and then you run that along the long length of your stiles. Now for the rail, you're only doing the end, this piece right here, of each of the rails, and with the rail bit, you run it like that. And it's essentially the same thing. The face of the workpiece is running on the table, but you're just cutting the end. And when I bought this set, I also bought this setup block, and it allows you to set the height, I can demonstrate it later, on the router table for the correct cuts for both the rails and stiles. Now, put that aside. We'll go on to the raised panel cut. This is a beefy thing. I'm running this at the slowest speed on my router table. It's a 4-wing or 4-blade cutter from Freud. And looking at their views of these 4-wing cutters that they have, they get very high marks, and people really, really like them. And I can attest to the clean cut on a piece of ugly pine. So this rides on the table like that, and your workpiece goes through. Oops, gotta get that there. Your workpiece goes through like that. See? So upside down, yeah, like that. But it basically just, that's how you're going to do it. And the way I'm doing it with the cherry is I'll be doing stepped cuts. I did it with this too, but I do step cuts. I'll just do a first cut, then slowly work my way up to the final cut, and then the final cut will be just a tiny little cut. And you see how proud this is here? Can you see it in the camera, how proud that is? I think that's a little too much for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it so it's about half the height of this center of the panel. And what that means is I'm going to have to back cut this, where it's 1/4 of an inch that fits into the rail and stile. I'm going to have to back cut that just a little bit to make it fit, because I'm not going to be cutting all the way down on this side, just to make that part right there less proud, less pronounced. I just think it looks a little more elegant, a little cooler, whatever. I just like the subtlety of that. So now over to the router table, and let's butcher some wood. So how is this all going to work? We're going to start with the long runs, which I'm just going to run across the bit to do the profile on the long parts before we do the stiles and the sides of the rails. Now, that's easy. You just run along the bit, you're done. To do the ends of the rails, this is my jig that I built. There's a video on this channel. I'll put a link in the description on building this particular jig. The only difference, the only deviation really from the plans was I put peel and stick 120 grit sandpaper here, so it really grips the workpiece, and the workpiece doesn't move. And the way it works is kind of simple. First things first, I'm going to do the side grain or the profiles on one side of all 8 pieces. Just basically, let's just run it across the bit, and you're done. That's all that takes. But to do the ends of the rails is where this jig comes in, and it rides up against the fence here. This fence here that's here is perpendicular to the plastic here, and that rides up against my router fence. And you put in a waste board. That's to prevent chip out. Then take your workpiece. This is one of my practice pieces. Take the workpiece and you put that in place. Make sure it's up. Everything's up against the fence correctly. This board, this particular part of the jig holds it tight against this fence, and then you clamp your workpiece in place, and then set the bit the right height that you want, and just quickly run it across your bit like so. Just whoop, and it's done. And then you just remove this piece and go to the next one. And now this backer board here is cut to the profile, so it still is not going to chip out. Now to do the raised panels, which are only going to be about this wide, and the fence is going to be open pretty wide here, so we'll have the fence, the bearing, and the fence to ride against. But to give it a little more backing, I cut out this piece of MDF, indexed this corner at 90 degrees, and glued on a handle. So now when I hold it like so, I can press it in that way very easily. But I've got a 90-degree cut, so when I can bring this is of course smaller than the board that's going up there, hold my board like this and just run it across the bit and do one end and then the other end and then the sides, and continue raising the bit and making the cuts until I get to where I want to be. And then I have to back cut this, like I said in the previous segment, not this piece particularly, but back cut it because I want the raised panel portion to be not as proud as the way the cutter cuts it. So that's the way I'm going to be cutting both the rail styles and the raised panel. Now I have rails and stiles. Where's the other one? Here it is. Is this the other one? Yeah. So, that's not. Stiles have the profile. I have to do a little sanding on some of these joints. And the rails, now we're going to test this. See how close I got to the fit that I wanted. This one. Don't need that. With some minor adjustments. I'm going to bring the camera over here so you can see this. So they're not fitting correctly because they're just sitting in here, but stiles and rails with these nice little miter joints at either corner. Bring this up so you can see what's going on there. See? And they fit very nicely with the gaps that I was looking for. This needs a little bit of, whoops, glue that back up again. This one needs a little, I'm going to have to put some weight on these when I glue them together to make sure I get the, well, the raised panel is going to flatten these out if there's any. This is just like an 16th of an inch vagary between this corner and this corner. A little bit of a twist in it, but that's okay because when I put the raised panel in and glue it all up, put some weights on it, that should keep it nice and flat. But there they are. Next trick, raised panels. Do an adequate measurement for the width and the length of the raised panels and remove about a 16th of an inch or thereabouts from each side. So the panel has room to move. Now, this is very dense, hard piece of cherry. I don't see it moving this way much at all, but it might. So onward to the next step. Let's make some raised panels. Actually, I'm going to call it a day here and end this video. I'm still at, for those of you who don't know, I shoot, edit, instead of shooting it all and then editing it. So my office is right around the corner here in the house. I just do a couple of segments. I go in, I edit it together, and I look at the timing, and I'm bumping up past 18 minutes. Not that it really matters that much. But anyhow, so let's finish this video here. And the next video, we'll do the raised panels because that's actually going to be a bit involved to get that set up correctly and to get them cut and get the width and length correct. So I might get the blanks cut out before all this. We go to the router table and start whacking off wood. So until next time, make great things out of wood.